If she hadn't happened to be the late Sir Bruce Forsyth's daughter, Debbie Matthews probably would never have seen her dogs again when they were stolen from her car. This was back in 2006.
It's been such a shock, dogs do become a part of your family. I know a lot of people may say they're only a couple of dogs. They are a part of Debbie's family, as our dogs have always been. And so it's a terrific shock. It's a wrench. You feel numb. You feel helpless because you can't, you feel as though you can't do anything.
Well, the fact that you...
Well, after that appeal, Gizmo and Widget were returned, but it set Debbie off on a now 13-year crusade to make it easier for stolen dogs to be reunited with their rightful owners. She now runs a charity called Vets Get Scanning, and she has launched an online petition calling for a series of changes in the law, and she joins us this morning. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning.
Good morning. And we also have with us Ivor Luff from Pets and Vets Glasgow. Good morning to you, Ivor.
Good morning, Kate. Good morning, Debbie.
Thanks for joining us. Debbie, I mean, we had a chat last week, didn't we? And you were saying that had you not been in that situation, that obviously your father, Sir Bruce Forsyth, had access to the media, you probably would never have seen your dogs again.
Absolutely. We wouldn't. There's no way I would have found them. We had the BBC News. We had newspapers. We did a live appeal on television. We had the media behind us, and that's how I got my dogs back. It wasn't because of their microchip, and that's the heartbreaking thing for all these owners still out there today searching for their missing pets, is that they are microchipped. They have got up-to-date details, which is what, as responsible owners, we've all been told to do. But then you find out that vets don't have to check new pets at registration. So there's huge gaps in the system.
Well, take us through this then, Debbie, because there's lots of dog owners out there, and I would imagine cat owners as well, who microchip their pet, and I am certainly one of them. When we got our dog as a puppy 6 years ago, it was one of the things on the list that you had to do. To be perfectly honest, and to my shame or embarrassment to a certain extent, I didn't particularly think through why I was doing it, but I suppose in my head I thought, I'm doing this because if she ever gets lost or indeed stolen, then this is going to help me get her back. But what you're telling people is, well, not necessarily.
No, it's so upsetting. I don't know if you can imagine what it feels like when, on the day your dog gets stolen, that you get told, well, if it gets sold on to a new person, they may not get found because people don't have to scan. So if you walk into a vet practice with my dog that you've bought innocently, you've got fake paperwork to go with her, and you go to the vet, if the vet doesn't scan and check the microchip registration on the original database, there's no way I'm going to get my dog back home. It's a common sense, a logical process, if you like. But vets say they can't do it. They don't have the time. They don't want to police it. And it's just everybody assumes that they already are doing it.
Which begs the question, what's the point of a microchip?
Exactly. Well, it does work. That's what's so infuriating. If your dog's picked up as a stray and it gets into the right hands and it ends up at a dog warden, they can scan. That's really why the compulsory microchipping laws were brought in. It was to save money on stray dogs.
Right.
So the government know that this is, we have to rely on promises by vets. They say it's best practice and we recommend it, and they've strengthened their advice to all vets, but still they don't have to do it, and that's our problem.
If your pet is lost and is microchipped, then it's a really positive step in terms of trying to get your pet back. So it's a good thing if your pet is lost. If your pet is stolen and, as you say, is passed on to somebody who buys the pet quite innocently, and I think that happened in your case, Debbie, then at that point, really the microchip isn't going to help you very much as the rightful owner. And so what is it that you want to change that you think will make the microchip more effective?
What we want is for all vets to scan and check the microchip registration on a first consultation, and also at the yearly health check. This is to try and find the dogs that have been out there for many years now that are lost and missing. it would also help people to update their details, make sure their chips are registered as well. And all the puppies that come in from overseas are microchipped but not registered. If you ask a vet, one of the biggest problems they have about microchips is that the chips aren't registered with up-to-date contact information. They could actually be going some way to helping pet owners, and it would be loved by everybody. It's a win-win situation, and in the course of doing that, you could also be reuniting some long-term missing pets.
Well, let's bring in Ivor from Pets and Vets Glasgow. Ivor, it seems to make sense, that the microchip should be there in the event that your dog or cat or pet is lost or stolen.
Yes, obviously the microchip is exceptionally important. There's now law. Any pup over the age of 6-8 weeks has to be microchipped. Where the problem lies is we do check microchips when they come in. If it's a new client that comes in, especially with an older dog, then there's usually has to be a paper trail with that pet. It's not if it comes in without a history of a previous vet, so we could find out vaccination history, that kind of scenario, then there are suspicions be raised to a certain degree. But to say that we would have to check the registration details of every pet that wasn't registered, but it wasn't our client, because if it's our client, we've got the details in our system. We can get that pet to its owner. If it comes to us lost, it can be reunited within 5 minutes because you get the details on our system. If it's logged on with either another vet or it's on a database that we don't have access to without phoning them, then that can take up to half an hour for us to get the actual microchip details. Like, for example, a pet that's come in, that's been found, comes to our practice, it automatically gets scanned, microchip comes up, we put that microchip into our system. If it's not on our system, it's not our client. We would then phone the database involved. That's when the problem comes in with actually getting the details of that owner. Hopefully the details are up to date. But then if it's not that owner, that's when the suspicion would rise, and then we'd put in place for the microchip registration companies to get contact with the previous owner.
So there's not one central database?
No. There's several microchip companies out there with databases, so we can't just phone one number. We deal with one company, but there's other companies that we have to deal with, phone them. That's where the time comes in, that we have to then get the information from them. And with the data protection, we're then sort of hands tied. What we can do, we have to rely on the registration company who've got permission to phone the owner to tell them that we found their pet.
Yeah.
Or if there's no paper trail, then that's when the microchip registration company has to phone the owner that they have in their details to see if it's the legitimate owner.
Do you agree there's an issue here?
Well, I think there is an issue. I think, to be fair, I don't think with us in certainly Glasgow, it's not a common issue. With any pet that comes in, we find there's a paper trail. Now, we assume it's a proper paper trail because either comes from a rescue society, like the Dogs Trust or SSPCA. We assume they've, for due diligence, have done the proper paper trails already to rehouse that dog. If they haven't, then the onus shouldn't come down to the veterinary surgeon who's trusting on the rehoming societies to do that work before they rehouse that dog. It's only when we don't have a paper trail like previous vet history, and we do our best, we push to find that previous vet, because that gives all the details of that dog with its microchip number, which follows it from 8 weeks old. If that number is still there right through, then we can follow the ownership of that pet. And if the ownership is all there, it's legitimate. And that's the vast majority of cases. There's have to be a break in that trail.
The dog theft has increased, hasn't it? Apparently up 27% since 2014. And it's something that we hear about so much more now than we used to. And also about the value of dogs now. They are a valuable commodity.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's not the way, obviously, that the owner necessarily sees them. They're a precious member of their family.
Obviously.
But, out in the marketplace, they are
a commodity.
A commodity. So Debbie, with your dogs, they were stolen from the back of the car, weren't they?
Yes.
And then what? Why? And how? Where did they go? What was the sort of journey then?
We found out that they'd been one of the dogs had been sold in a market in Southall in a box. There were other dogs in boxes, and this man had bought Widget. And the following day, we did a follow-up, and Gizmo had been sold in Hayes, not far from Southall, sort of on the M25 route. So it was about 30 miles away from where they were taken. And she'd seen Gizmo in a park. But I'd like to come back to your vet.
To Ivor.
Yes, because there is a single point of checking up on the microchip database is called checkerchip.co.uk. I don't know if you know that, which is open to everybody to check whatever database the chip is on, which doesn't take that long. We're not suggesting that a vet does it. We're suggesting that the vet nurse does it or receptionist does it. It doesn't have to be done there and then in front of the client. It can be done later, or you can get someone who can check the numbers through at a later date. And it's no good if you've scanned a microchip and just put that microchip number on your files and you haven't cross-checked the original database. You're giving that dog a whole new identity.
But we have to have the paper trail. If something like that comes up and there's no paper trail from the previous vet or a rescue society, yes, that's where we would start coming in. We'd put our detective hats on to see where the problem lay. And that's where we get in touch with the registration companies, who then, if that dog has, somebody's tried to re-register that dog with a different ownership, they're duty-bound to phone the original owner to see what the problem is. When it comes to us, then, if we've got the proper paper trail and we can actually access the details from a previous vet, which is, I must say, is what happens. We either get all the paperwork from the Dogs Trust, SSPCA, wherever that pet came from, if it's an adult dog, then the paper trail is there. Then we'll assume that the actual rescue societies have done that. If it's a dog coming in off the street with a new client and we cannot get if they cannot give us the previous vet's history or previous owner's history, that's when we start digging into it to see if there's a problem where this dog came from.
But there's no statutory obligation on you to do that.
No, we would do it anyway. We want to find out the details of that dog, see where it came from.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess not every vet is necessarily, is going to do that, Debbie.
Oh, no. We've got a vet who constantly puts up old puppy so-and-so has just arrived at our practice. We've double-checked to make sure the chip is registered and up to date. There are vets that are doing it and understand what we're saying, but you've got the vet who's said to a lady whose dog's been missing for a while now, Rags, if Rags was sitting underneath her missing poster in the waiting room, he still wouldn't check the microchip registration. So, it has to, for all the great vets that are doing it, and thank you very much if you're doing it, that's fantastic, but we need every vet to make this work.
So do you want it to be a legal obligation for vets to be able for vets to do this?
Yes, because we've been in discussion for 13 years with Royal College and with BVA. They can't make it a directive. They say to us, we can't do this. We can make the promise, we can recommend it, we can say it's best practice, but it's only advice. So now we're turning to DEFRA, who now got a consultation on the compulsory dog microchip regulations coming up in the new year, because there are lots of issues with the databases as well. This isn't the only problem. And we're saying to DEFRA, you've got to get this right now. They're thinking about introducing compulsory microchipping of cats. Well, it's all gonna disappear down the same route. It's not going to work.
And then the other factor here is that there is no specific criminal offence of pet theft.
No, pets are goods and chattels. So in law, for example, we had a pet thief go to court in December last year. He'd stolen 2 pugs and he was fined. I think the fine was £250 compensation and he paid costs of £400, and both the pugs are still missing because our dogs are valued at under £500 and they're second-hand goods. That's what they get. So we need a separate definition in the Theft Act for domestic pets. It's a small amendment. And we have cross-party support. We just hope that all the MPs that support us get back in again.
Well, good luck with that,
we
Debbie.
Don't forget about Brexit. It's about the dogs.
Oh,
so it's really important.
Listen, thank you for bringing it to our attention, at least, because I don't know if all pet owners will necessarily be aware of the complications of this. So certainly for me, it made me think, because as I say, I had just, got the dog microchip because that's what you are supposed to do, and I hadn't really plotted through, what might happen and how useful that is.
Why would you assume anything else that it wouldn't help you get your dog back? That's the problem we're facing with people all the time. And I just say we've got a Ferns Law petition, which is to go to government to get to DEFRA. And if you see a lost dog or stolen dog on posts and social media, it really helps to get them home if you share.
Right,
So
yeah.
please help.
Yeah, I always do that. Debbie, thank you very much. Debbie Matthews, pet welfare campaigner. Thanks also to Ivor Love from Pets and Vets Glasgow. We do, appreciate you coming in and giving your perspective on it, Ivor.